And those were the major developments. Now the Full News edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, President of the High Judicial Council, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has called for suing the Israeli occupation at the International Criminal Court for their crimes against the Palestinians.
نتساءل أين هي العدالة في العالم؟ أين هو الحق للشعوب المضطهدة وعلى رأسها الشعب الفلسطيني؟ لقد انهارت في فلسطين المحتلة كل معايير والقيم الإنسانية والأخلاقية والدينية والقانونية أمام ما يشهده العالم يوميا من مجازر وحشية ترتكبها قوات الاحتلال ضد الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق أمام مرأى وصمت عالمي ورهيب. فإنني أناشد جميع أحرار العالم والخبراء القانونيين العرب والهيئات والمنظمات الحقوقية إلى رفع دعوة قضائية أمام محكمة الجنايات الدولية والمنظمات الدولية لحقوق الإنسان ضد الكيان الإسرائيلي، وهو السبيل الوحيد لإنهاء عقود من الإفلات من العقاب على الجرائم المرتكبة بحق الفلسطينيين، على اعتبار أن الملاحقة القضائية الدولية الفعالة تبقى الملاذ الوحيد لأشقاء الفلسطينيين لتحقيق العدالة الدولية واستعادة حقوقهم المشروعة في إقامة دولتهم المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشريف.
The statement was made by the President as part of his chairmanship of the opening ceremony of the new judicial year 2023-2024 at the headquarters of the Supreme Court here in Algiers. And the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has received earlier the French Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, here in Algiers. Following his meeting with the President, the French official said that he conveyed a message of friendship and respect from French President Emmanuel Macron to President Abdelmadjid Tebboune.
J'ai eu l'honneur d'être reçu.
It was an honor to be received first by the Algerian Interior Minister, whom I thank for his collaboration with the French Interior Minister. I was then received by the President of the Republic, who honored me by receiving me, my delegation, and the Ambassador of France to hand him a message of the French President, a message of friendship and respect, and to thank him for the work we do together in line with the cooperation that we have, notably cooperation with the Interior Ministry on civil security, migration and judicial police to tackle the files of importance to both of us, and to reiterate the respect and friendship that we have towards the Algerian people and the strong ties that the Republic built in this regard.
Let's note that the meeting took place in the presence of the Cabinet Director at the Presidency of the Republic, Nadir El Arbawi, the Interior Minister Brahim Marada, and the Algerian Ambassador to Paris, Said Moussi. The Algerian radio has been airing programs, news and testimonies to show the world the reality of the atrocities committed by the Israeli occupation against the defenseless population of the Gaza Strip. The Director General of the Algerian radio, Mohamed Baghali, shed light on the radio's efforts to show the world the Israeli barbarity against the Palestinians.
As we have always stood by just causes in the world, today we stand by our Palestinian brothers. Our programs on the national radio aim to confirm that the victim in this barbarity is the defenseless Palestinian people and the executioner is the Zionist entity.
That was the statement of the Director General of the Algerian radio, Mohamed Baghali. And the spokesman Abu Ubaidah has said that the Palestinian Hamas resistance movement is pursuing its operations against the Israeli attacks, stressing that its operations are only at the beginning.
Our defense operations are continuing and are only at the beginning. We still have a lot to do to this enemy. And as we have promised this enemy, Gaza will be a graveyard for them and a muddy swamp to their soldiers, forces, and political and military leadership.
He added that those who entered Gaza before from the Israeli occupation know the strength of the Hamas fighters.
واسألوا جنود العدو الذين دخلوا.
Ask the soldiers of the enemy who entered Gaza before, and those who are still in psychological rehabilitation centers or suffer from different kinds of disabilities, not to mention those who were killed in groups or those who are still kept hostage.
في الأسر لدينا.
That was a statement of the spokesman Abu Ubaidah on the ongoing operations carried out by the Hamas resistance movement. The directors of the main UN agencies, in a rarely common joint statement, expressed their indignation at the increasing number of civilian casualties and called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Mariam Bershi tells us more.
The heads of the UN agencies stressed that for the past month, the world have been witnessing with shock and horror the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories on account of the increasing number of devastated and lost lives. The leaders of the 18 organizations, including the UNICEF, the World Food Programme, the World Health Organization, deplored the increasing number of victims of the Israeli aggression on Gaza. According to the news agency Wafa, over 9,800 people, half of them children, have been killed in the relentless Israeli bombardments on Gaza Strip. The UN agencies rejected as unacceptable that the whole population was besieged and confronted to the Israeli attacks targeting their homes, shelters, hospitals and places of worship. The population, they insisted, was banned access to essential assistance to survive. The Palestinian Red Crescent called on the international community to urgently intervene to protect the workers of the Al-Quds hospital, its 500 patients, and more than 14,000 displaced, mainly women and children, who are using it as a shelter, while the Israeli forces intensified the bombardments near the building, injuring several people.
The humanitarian aid that have entered Gaza since the beginning of the Israeli aggression last month do not even reach the number of aid lorries that used to enter Gaza on a daily basis before the ongoing Israeli aggression. The director of the Rafah crossing point on the Palestinian side, Hisham Adwan, had this to say about the insufficient humanitarian aid entering Gaza.
According to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East, 48 positions were damaged by the unprecedented Israeli bombardments, causing the displacement of 1.5 million people. Meanwhile, the US said it was actively working towards securing the funneling of more humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. Following talks held in Ankara with his Turkish counterpart, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken affirmed that major progress was made in the past few days to increase aid to Gaza that could be extended significantly, stressing that a pause in the fighting could help achieve such an objective. During a tour of the Middle East that led him notably to West Bank, where he met Palestinian President Abbas, to the US diplomacy chief advocated a humanitarian pause to supply the Palestinian population with vital assistance. This came as the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, announced in Brussels that the EU would provide an additional €25 million worth of aid to the Palestinians, bringing to $100 million its aid to the Gaza Strip.
That was Mariam Barshi telling us about the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to the region, while the Israeli army pursues its bombardments against the Gaza Strip, claiming scores of lives. Now, the director of the Rafah crossing point on the Palestinian side, Hisham Adwan, had this to say about the insufficient humanitarian aid entering Gaza.
From the 21st of October till now, about 300 lorries have arrived in Gaza. These lorries were laden with medical products, first aid kits, and foodstuffs. These lorries and quantities do not meet the necessary and urgent needs of the Gaza Strip. Before the current aggression on Gaza, 700 lorries used to enter the Rafah crossing point on a daily basis. In other words, all the aid that entered Gaza since the beginning of the Israeli aggression do not exceed half the quantity that used to enter the Gaza Strip daily. We have in the hospitals of the Gaza Strip almost 20,000 injured patients. The majority of them need serious surgeries as a result of the tons of explosives and rockets used in the Israeli attacks against the houses of citizens, which were destroyed, with their inhabitants inside. We need the exit of hundreds, if not thousands, of the seriously injured to be treated in the hospitals of Arab countries or Islamic countries and friendly countries.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 14 hours 41 minutes, Algiers time. The Palestinian Authority spokesman Nabila Abu Rudaina has reiterated that the authorities' priority is to secure cessation of Israel's acts of aggression against the besieged Gaza Strip, while insisting on the necessity to supply aid to its population. He was quoted by the news agency Wafa as saying that it was to speed up the funneling of humanitarian aid and medical supplies to the 1 million people in Gaza, and called on the international community to put pressure to bear on the Israeli occupation to force it to stop its crimes. In a similar move, the Palestinian Fatah movement affirmed that the international community must take up its responsibility and put a halt to the ongoing bloodshed in Gaza. In this respect, it warned against Israel's displacement plans designed to drive the Palestinians out of the West Bank and Gaza, saying they are doomed to failure on account of the Palestinians' resistance and determination to safeguard its land, whatever the sacrifices. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council will be meeting today behind closed doors to examine the situation in Gaza following the Israeli attacks, notably on the refugee camp of Jabalia. Meanwhile, the Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process and the head of the UN Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, will report on the humanitarian situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, notably the West Bank. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and back to the country now. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmad Attaf, is on a working visit to the Republic of Slovenia, during which he met with his counterpart, Tanja Fajon. The visit comes at the invitation of the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia. The visit aims to strengthen bilateral relations and deepening the political dialogue on regional and international issues of common concern, notably the latest developments of the situation in the Middle East and the Sahel region, as well as other issues included in the agenda of the UN Security Council, especially that Algeria and Slovenia are to join the UN Security Council as non-permanent members as of January 2024. During his visit, Mr. Attaf is also expected to meet the president of the country as well as the president of the National Council of Slovenia. He is also expected to hold a meeting with the Minister of Environment, Climate and Energy, given that Algeria is one of the main suppliers of natural gas to Slovenia. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 14 hours 43 minutes Algiers time, and time now for the headlines. The President of the Republic, President of the High Judicial Council, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has called for suing the Israeli occupation at the International Criminal Court for their crimes against the Palestinians. And the directors of the main UN agencies, in a rarely common joint statement, expressed their indignation at the increasing number of civilian casualties and called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. And the U.S. Secretary of State has been touring the region while the Israeli army pursues its bombardments against the Gaza Strip, claiming more than 9,900 lives. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and that's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to the international event of the week, presented by Mohamed Khatel.
The international event of the week.
Again this week, the Israeli aircraft pursued their bombing of the Gaza Strip, claiming scores of lives among the civilian population. The most violent attack carried out by the Israeli army hit the refugee camp of Jabalia, killing and wounding scores of civilians. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the comprehensive Israeli aggression on the Palestinian territory killed more than 9,600 people and wounded over 25,000 others. All communication and internet services were again cut off this week, in addition to the widespread destruction of infrastructure and facilities caused by the ongoing Israeli bombing of Gaza. The serious shortages of water, electricity and fuel that caused hospitals to suspend operations exacerbate the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Asked on whether the concerns raised by the U.S. ambassador to the UN that a shutdown of communication endangers the lives of civilians, UN personnel and humanitarian workers were likely to be taken into account by the Israeli occupying authorities, which have so far turned a deaf ear to all truce offers, Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi from California had this to say.
Those concerns are real. Actions like this can easily amount to crime against humanity. It is without a doubt a clear violation of international law. When you look at it from the premise that is designed to cut basic resources to the population or a population with the intent to punish them, just imagine the impact that such action has on the medical sector. For example, having access to a computer and the internet is very, very important. It helps establish a medical record of the patient, which ultimately can ease up can help the doctors understand the sickness and cure them and help cure them better. Many actors who are using these communications, including the internet, point to the fact that this has terrible consequences on the lives of the population. What is also alarming is the fact that the Israelis continue to do this all the time. They have bombed the cables, the cell towers, and infrastructures that could help people maintain be online, and we cause, and as a result, it causes, all this bombing causes a loss of connectivity. The workers, hospital, everyone in Gaza find or pointed out that this makes their job very, very difficult. All to suggest that this action is, while it is expected from the Israelis, it has severe consequences, and Israel should be held responsible for such actions.
In a statement made this week, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was deeply alarmed by the intensification of the conflict in the enclave. This, he said, includes the expansion of ground operations by the Israeli forces, in addition to the intense airstrikes, while stressing that the protection of civilians must be respected at all times. The UN chief reiterated his condemnation of the killing of civilians in Gaza and said that he is dismayed by reports that 2/3 of those who have been killed are women and children. He reiterated his call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and for an unimpeded humanitarian access to be granted consistently to meet the urgent needs of the population in Gaza. Asked about the reasons behind the persistent divergences among the UN Security Council's members over a humanitarian truce called by the UN General Assembly in a resolution adopted by a majority of its members, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had the following.
What the United Nations Secretary General said is very, very important. It's unprecedented for him to say what he said, and in a way he said it. But as we have seen following this statement, his statement, he has been accused of being anti-Semitic, has been attacked by the Israelis and pro-Israelis and the Americans, all to undermine his point. And this is consistent. Boutros Ghali, United Nations Secretary General back in the late 70s, criticized Israel for the massacre against the Kana massacre, which led to the killing of 300 individuals, from a lot of them from the United Nations staff. And he voiced that concern and made sure that tried to make sure that Israel is held it's held accountable for its responsibility. Unfortunately, he couldn't do much, and as a result, this was a factor that people say, or analysts specifically say, that did not help him, that led to him not being re-elected for another term, which is unusual for this position. The reason behind this differences in the United Nations Security Council is obvious. The United States in particular continues to be supporting Israel and it's using its rights, veto rights.
This week, Bolivia announced that it cut off its diplomatic ties with Israel over its military action in Gaza. The Bolivian Deputy Foreign Minister, Freddy Mamani, said the government's decision was taken in response to, as he put it, the aggressive and disproportionate Israeli military offensive taking place in the Gaza Strip. Other Latin American countries, like Brazil, Colombia and Chile, have strongly condemned Israel's military operation in Gaza and rejected as unacceptable the violations of international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip. Asked on whether other Latin American countries may follow suit and reconsider their relations with Israel, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
Definitely, there are so far few countries from Latin America who have criticized Israel and have taken a strong position against the Zionist regime. Bolivia was followed by Chile, Colombia, and then Chile, Argentina and Brazil have also increased their criticism of what Israel is doing in Gaza. This is really expected because of the long historical traditions that connect South American countries with their Arab heritage. Positions like this are not uncommon. But more than anything else, it speaks volume for Palestine to have allies at this juncture and seeing them taking concrete steps by way of cutting diplomatic ties. This will strengthen the Palestinians, giving them more courage, those who are inside Gaza, to continue and be resilient in their struggle against the Israelis. It could also have a strong impact on drafting resolutions and passing resolutions, and also within the Security Council. This is expected, and Israel has taken notice by criticizing this country, and as always threatened to punish this country for taking a stand with the Palestinians. Again, this is not unusual, and it's Israel's used this tactic to deter other countries from taking the same side.
The Rafah crossing point from Gaza to Egypt opened this week for the first time since the Israeli authorities imposed their siege on Gaza to allow injured people to receive treatment. Rafah remains the only crossing point for humanitarian aid.
14 hours 54 minutes. Algeria's time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And the Israeli war on the Gaza Strip started on October 7 has taken a severe toll on journalists. Today said the Committee to Protect Journalists in the Gaza Strip. It said it is investigating all reports of journalists and media workers killed, injured or missing in the war, including those hurt as hostilities spread to neighboring Lebanon. As of November 6th, the CPJ's parliamentary investigations showed at least 36 journalists and media workers were among an estimated 11,000 killed by the Israeli aggression since the war began on October 7th. Journalists in Gaza face particularly high risks as they try to cover the conflict in the face of an Israeli ground assault on Gaza City. Devastating Israeli airstrikes disrupted communications and extensive power outages, it said. CPJ said that 36 journalists and media workers were confirmed dead. 8 were reported injured, 3 were reported missing, and 8 were reported arrested, in addition to multiple assaults, threats, cyber attacks, censorship, and killings of family members. It said it is also investigated numerous unconfirmed reports of other journalists being killed, missing, detained, hurt, or threatened, and of damage to media offices and journalists' homes. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and regarding the CPJ's report, it emphasizes that journalists are civilians doing important work during times of crisis and must not be targeted by warring parties, said Sharif Mansour, CPJ's Middle East and North Africa program coordinator. Journalists across the region are making great sacrifices to cover this heartbreaking conflict. Those in Gaza in particular have paid and continue to pay an unprecedented toll and face exponential threats. Many have lost colleagues, families, and media facilities and have fled seeking safety when there is no safe haven or exit. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and that was the report of journalists suffering from the aggressions of the Israeli occupation against the Gaza Strip. That's it for our news bulletin. I'll meet you again tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. address time for our full news edition. Goodbye.
ما حد بيقدر يوصل، وقطعوا الاتصالات وقطعوا النت، فيش اتصال بين الاسعافات ولا في اتصال بين الداخل والخارج، ما حد بيعلم عنا، بيعملوا عملهم كلهيته وشردوا الناس من الشمال جابوهم بيجوا على المنطقة الآمنة، ما فيش منطقة آمنة، لحتى الآن ما في اسعافات اللي تطلع الناس، خلص الله يرحم الشهداء اللي نزلت عليه الطاب ما في حد يسعفهم، إذا شافوا واحد أو اثنين شافوهم أخذوهم، ولا الباقي تحت نزل مش قادرين، رحمة الله عليهم الشهداء.
استمعوا إلينا لنقل المعلومات من مصادرها الرسمية وتفسير حي للأحداث في حصص تحليلية مميزة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا